Imagine this. You wake up one morning to find that every source of pain in your life has vanished. The betrayals that once carved wounds into your trust, the losses that hollowed out your chest, the criticisms that whispered, "You're not enough," all of them gone, not just forgotten, but erased, as if the universe itself has granted you immunity. At first, it feels like standing in the eye of a storm, an impossible stillness where nothing can touch you. But then, a creeping unease settles in, because if nothing can hurt you, does anything matter? This is the paradox at the heart of invulnerability. We spend our lives building walls against grief, against rejection, against failure. Yet the moment we succeed, we find ourselves staring at an even more terrifying question. What is left when there is nothing left to fear? Think of the last time you were hurt, not just physically, but in the way that lingers. A betrayal, a failure, a love that turned to dust in your hands. That pain was a signal, a raw and screaming proof that you cared. Strip it away, and what remains? A life without stakes, without edges, without the friction that makes joy more than just the absence of sorrow. This is the great contradiction of invulnerability. We crave it like water in a desert, but it is a mirage that would leave us thirstier than before. Consider the myth of Achilles. His mother dipped him in the river Styx to make him invincible, but in doing so, she made him something less than human. His heel, the one vulnerable spot, became the very thing that gave his life meaning, because without it, he was no longer a man, but a weapon. A force of nature, yes, but also a tragedy waiting to unfold. Now ask yourself, what is your heel? The thing you most fear losing, the wound you most dread reopening? That is not your weakness. It is your anchor. It is the proof that you are alive, that you are here, that you have something at stake in this world. But what if you could transcend it, not by numbing yourself, not by building higher walls, but by reaching a state where pain no longer controls you, where you could face loss, rejection, even death, and still feel not nothing, but everything, without being destroyed by it? This is not a fantasy. It is the oldest quest of philosophy, the hidden thread running through every religion, every meditation, every act of courage in the face of suffering. The Stoics called it ataraxia, the unshakable peace of the mind. The Buddhists called it nirvana, the liberation from suffering. The existentialists called it authenticity, the choice to embrace life's chaos without illusion. But here's the catch. None of these paths promise safety. They promise something far more dangerous: freedom. And freedom is not the absence of pain. It is the willingness to walk through it. So let me ask you again, not as a hypothetical, but as the most urgent question of your life. What would you become if nothing could hurt you? And more importantly, are you ready to find out? A slap to the face stings, but the humiliation lingers. A betrayal cuts, but the doubt it plants, was I unworthy? Will it happen again? Festers like a slow poison. The real terror is not the wound itself, but the story it tells about you, about the world, about your place in it. This is the hidden problem. We do not suffer because we feel pain. We suffer because we interpret it. The illusion of control. Human beings are meaning-making machines. When pain strikes, we do not simply register it, we narrate it. A breakup is not just heartache, it is proof you are unlovable. A failure is not just a setback, it is confirmation you were never enough. We weave pain into identity, and in doing so, grant it power far beyond its physical or emotional weight. The ancient Stoics knew this. Epictetus, born a slave and crippled by his master, wrote, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them." His insight was radical. Suffering is not imposed by the world, but by the mind's insistence that reality should conform to its demands. When it does not, we do not just feel pain, we feel betrayed. The existential trap Jean-Paul Sartre took this further. He argued that human beings are condemned to freedom. We cannot not choose, cannot not assign meaning. Even refusing to choose is a choice. This is why pain cuts so deep. It forces us to confront the terrifying truth that we are the authors of our own suffering. Think of a time you were wronged. The raw hurt was one thing, but the real torment began when you asked, "Why me? What does this say about who I am?" In that moment, you were not just a victim of circumstance, you were a prisoner of your own need for the universe to make sense. The armor that becomes a cage. Carl Jung saw this in his patients. The psyche, he observed, constructs defenses not just to block pain, but to avoid the unbearable truth that pain is inevitable. We build personas, the perfect employee, the invulnerable partner, the unshakable optimist, not because they protect us, but because they let us pretend we are exempt from the human condition. But here is the cruel twist. The armor we wear to keep pain out is the same armor that suffocates us. Nietzsche called this the spirit of gravity, the weight of all the ways we deny our fragility in the name of safety. Become who you are, he urged, not by avoiding suffering, but by making a ladder of your own wounds. The modern betrayal. Today, this problem has metastasized. Social media sells the fantasy of curated invulnerability, lives without awkwardness, without failure, without the mess of being human. Therapy culture pathologizes normal grief as trauma, framing pain as a glitch to be fixed rather than a thread in the fabric of existence. Self-help gurus promise unshakable confidence, as if doubt were not the price of growth. We have been taught that happiness is the absence of suffering. But the great philosophers, the mystics, the survivors of wars and prisons knew better. Happiness is the ability to hold suffering without being destroyed by it. Viktor Frankl, who survived Auschwitz, put it bluntly. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. His insight was forged in hell. Pain is inevitable, but victimhood is optional. The fork in the road. So here we stand at the threshold of a revelation. The problem is not that we feel pain. The problem is that we have been taught to fear it, to see it as proof of brokenness rather than the heartbeat of a life fully lived. But what if there is another way? What if the path to true invulnerability does not lie in avoiding pain, but in transcending its meaning? But you don't know its shadow, the way it warps your decisions when you're not looking, the way it whispers rules you never agreed to. Every time you've swallowed your truth to avoid conflict, every time you've stayed small to dodge judgment, every time you've chosen the safe path over the real one, that's not you making a choice. That's the ghost of past pain steering your hand. The silent sabotage of avoidance. Neurologically, we are wired to prioritize threat avoidance over reward pursuit. A single traumatic experience can rewrite your brain's risk calculus for decades. This is why people stay in dead-end jobs, toxic relationships, and stagnant lives long after logic says they should leave. The known misery feels safer than the unknown. But here's what no one tells you. Avoidance is compounding interest on suffering. That difficult conversation you didn't have, it will resurface as resentment. That dream you abandoned to play it safe, it will metastasize into regret. The psychologist Carl Rogers saw this clearly. When I accept myself as I am, then I can change. But we refuse to accept, and so we remain trapped in the very patterns we hate. The bureaucratization of the soul modern society has institutionalized pain avoidance. We medicate normal sadness as depression, pathologize loneliness as social anxiety disorder, and frame existential questioning as maladaptive rumination. The DSM-5, Psychiatry's Diagnostic Bible, now lists over 300 mental disorders, a taxonomy of human suffering that often mistakes the symptoms of an unlivable life for chemical imbalances. Aldous Huxley predicted this in Brave New World. The perfect dictatorship would have the appearance of democracy, but would basically be a prison without walls. Our prison? The belief that discomfort is a system error rather than the price of consciousness. The paradox of emotional safety research on emotional suppression reveals the cruel irony. Trying to numb specific emotions dulls all emotions. MRI scans show that people who chronically avoid negative feelings have reduced activity in both the amygdala, fear center, and the nucleus accumbens, pleasure center. In seeking to erase pain, they accidentally erase joy. This is what Schopenhauer meant when he wrote, "Life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. The more successfully you avoid suffering, the more Kongshu you become, not because life has no meaning, but because meaning requires friction." The social contagion of fear, pain avoidance, is culturally transmitted. Children who see their parents catastrophize minor setbacks learn to do the same. Workplaces that punish mistakes create cultures of defensive mediocrity. Romantic partners who weaponize vulnerability teach each other emotional lockdown. The anthropologist Ernest Becker called this the denial of death, our collective pretense that mortality, and by extension all vulnerability, is someone else's problem. But as he warned in The Denial of Death, to live fully is to live with an awareness of the rumble of terror that underlies everything. The fork in the road. We stand at a precipice. The evidence is clear. The more we try to engineer a pain-free existence, the more we hollow out our humanity. But there is another way, one that doesn't require naivety or masochism, but a fundamental renegotiation with reality itself. The question is no longer, how do I avoid suffering? But what kind of suffering am I willing to endure for a life that matters? Not to invite chaos, but to finally breathe. This is not about positive thinking or resilience hacks. This is about something far more radical. Rewriting your relationship with pain at the neurological level. The antidote to avoidance. Exposure. Behavioral psychology reveals an uncomfortable truth. The only way to disarm fear is to move toward it. Studies on exposure therapy show that when individuals confront traumatic memories, rather than suppress them, the brain literally rewires itself. The amygdala shrinks. The prefrontal cortex strengthens. What was once unbearable becomes just another memory. This is why Holocaust survivors like Edith Eger could later say, "You can't heal what you don't feel." Not because feeling is cathartic, but because avoidance is the glue that binds trauma to identity. The Stoic Gambit. Ancient Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Each morning, they would visualize worst-case scenarios: betrayal, bankruptcy, even death. But this wasn't pessimism. It was inoculation. By mentally rehearsing suffering, they drained it of its power to shock. Modern neuroscience confirms this. When subjects vividly imagine feared outcomes, their stress response to real-life versions drops by up to 60%. The lesson? Fear is a paper tiger, but only if you stare it down. The Nietzschean turn, Nietzsche's concept of amor fati, love of fate, takes this further. Not merely bear what is necessary, but love it. This isn't resignation. It's alchemy. When cancer patients in studies reframe their illness as a wake-up call, their psychological distress plummets while life satisfaction soars. The key lies in one mental shift: seeing pain not as something happening to you, but as raw material for you. A breakup becomes freedom. A failure becomes data. Even grief becomes proof of love's depth. The Radical Acceptance Protocol, Marsha Linehan's dialectical behavior therapy, offers a practical method. Observe the pain without judgment, e.g., my chest feels tight. Describe its components. There's sadness here and also fear of being alone. Participate fully in the experience. Set a timer for 10 minutes and just feel it. Clinical trials show this approach reduces emotional suffering by 40% faster than suppression. Why? Because what you fully experience, you can finally release. The existential pivot. Viktor Frankl's logotherapy asks one devastating question: what is this pain asking me to become? In concentration camps, he noticed that prisoners who found meaning in suffering, protecting others, preserving dignity, often outlived stronger men who'd given up. Modern research on post-traumatic growth confirms this. Up to 70% of trauma survivors report positive psychological changes, but only when they engage in meaning-making. The way forward. This is your crossroads moment. The path to true invulnerability isn't about avoiding pain. It's about developing pain literacy, to read its hidden messages, to let it carve you into something wiser. The warrior's secret was never armor. It was knowing exactly where to let the blade fall. It was never, how do I become invulnerable? The real question is, what if you already are? The illusion of fragility. Every spiritual tradition whispers the same secret: you are not your pain. Buddhism calls it anatta, no self. The Stoics called it the inner citadel. Modern neuroscience confirms it. When subjects observe their emotions with detachment, the brain's suffering circuits quiet, while insight regions light up. This is the first revelation. You are the sky, not the storm. The part of you that can watch yourself hurt. That's the unshakable core, the alchemy of meaning. Viktor Frankl's prisoners who survived Auschwitz shared one trait. They could answer, why? A man who believed he must live to see his daughter again outlasted stronger men. A woman who vowed to testify endured torture that broke others. Neuroscience now shows why. When we link suffering to purpose, the brain's opioid system activates. Physical pain literally decreases. This is why martyrs can smile on pyres and mothers lift cars off children. Meaning doesn't just comfort, it rewires biology. The ultimate invulnerability. Here lies the paradox. Total safety comes through total surrender. When you stop resisting pain's existence, when you grant it the right to be there, its fangs retract. Studies on chronic pain patients prove this. Those who practice radical acceptance need 30% less medication. The ancient samurai understood. Their meditation wasn't on victory, but on being already dead. With nothing left to lose, every action became free. The final door. Now, you see the truth. Invulnerability isn't a fortress. It's fluidity, not the absence of pain, but the certainty that no pain can define you, not control over life's storms, but the unshakable knowledge that you are the ocean, capable of absorbing tsunamis, yet never being diminished. The last question. So I ask you now, not as a thinker, but as a human staring into the fire. What would you dare if you knew no heartbreak could break you? What love would you give if rejection lost its sting? What life would you live if fear was just weather passing through? The answer whispers in your bones. It always has.